Hi, and you're very welcome to episode 14 of the League of Ireland podcast here on finalwhistle.ie. Today, I'm not joined by one, but two co-hosts on the show, and I'm delighted to have Dean Zambra and Alan Keane here as we recap the first 14 rounds of fixtures in the League of Ireland Premier Division. A few less in the First Division, yes, but we'll get into all of that over the next 40 minutes or so. A little bit of a light bite for the mid-season break. Lads, you're very welcome to the show.
Cheers, Brev. Thanks for having me.
Now, Alan, we better start, I suppose, with a bit of clarification on some comments we made on last week's show. And we talked about the tweet that was issued on social media about the scoreboard failure in Tala and what that might have been or what that might have represented. Now, Shamrock Rovers have been in touch with us to clarify that there was a scoreboard malfunction late in the second half and that the insinuation that it was a stunt or a thing was false and that it was just purely a technical issue, unfortunate as it may have been. They have been in touch. We would love to have someone from the club on to talk about it and to really put the record completely to bed on that, and or anything else about what maybe life is like in Tala and Shamrock Rovers at the moment as they look to get their league title up and running. Alan, I suppose it was yourself that got the brunt of that last week. Your thoughts on the whole situation?
Well, obviously we done the podcast on Tuesday, so that came about from obviously a tweet from Sligo Rovers and a few other people had tweeted it. And we obviously ran it on our show because we knew it wasn't clarified at that time. So we do apologise. I apologise that if we got it wrong. I've apologised to anyone that messaged me on Twitter, albeit they got a bit personal and stuff. But look, you touched on it there, Breffany. We'd love to have someone on the show. We've tried a few times and we've not had anyone, and we've had most players on from most clubs, so it'd be nice to have a player or manager or someone involved with the club on the show sometime.
Yeah, we did invite someone from the club on to talk about this or any other issue or any other topic they'd like to talk about at the moment in terms of the club. They have as yet not replied to us, but we would love to hear from them. In terms of the weekend, obviously, Dean, you got up close and personal with Shamrock Rovers over the weekend in Bishopsgate. It was all going swimmingly for the first 96 minutes of the game. And then, unfortunately, as they've done so often this season, they found the back of the net deep into injury time and took all 3 points. I think I know the answer to this, but how do you feel after such a kind of a last minute robbery by Rovers down in Bishopsgate?
Yeah, it was obviously bitterly disappointing not to get it out of the game, and like we felt we'd put in a good shift and it deserved maybe a point from it. Probably didn't do enough kind of to win a game or to score. We didn't put Alan Mans under a lot of pressure, but we felt that organisation wise we were good and we had a good game plan. We stuck to it, so obviously bitterly disappointing then, like in such late on to concede a goal. But like we say all the time, champions do that, and Shamrock Rovers have shown ability to do it quite regularly, and it's not a fluke when it happens. So you have to give some credit to their side as well.
Yeah, no, I know. Speaking of Twitter, I saw you having a conversation on Twitter during the week about the number of times Shamrock Rovers have done that this season. I think the calculation was that they've scored goals that have rewarded them with 10 points bonus after the 85th minute. That's some trick if you can keep that going for any length of period at all. And if they can keep going all season, they're going to really be thereabouts at the end of the season anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
Look, they definitely will be, because I think they're 2 points off the record set by Drogheda. Mark McCadden had said that he'd tweeted me back on because I asked the question, and that's phenomenal, and that's going to be massive come the end of the season.
Yeah, I suppose it doesn't help Dean any much this week as they face into a disappointing, I suppose, way to go into the mid-season break. In terms of the other games over the weekend, we did, of course, have a full round of fixtures. Bows and Waterford, they were in action on Saturday. Also, a fairly comfortable win in the end for Bohemians. They'll be happy with their lot in that particular game. Of course, the goals from Dawson Devoy, Ross Tierney and Andy Lyons. And unfortunately for Waterford, they lost a player in the last 25 minutes, and it didn't really matter at that stage. The game was well over. I think Bows had this put to bed by half-time.
Yeah, it was a comfortable enough game for Bows in the end, and I think they're playing really well at the moment. You know, they had a slip up against Pats, but other than that, they're playing quite well and they found a bit of rhythm. And I think we all said at the start of the season replacing that front four was going to be an issue for them to gel and get going. But I think they really have got going and they've been quite impressive. And the wins have been strong wins in the last couple of weeks as well. Like, you know, so they look to be up and running and probably don't want to break right now just because they've hit a bit of form. Like, you know, so that'll be something to watch coming back, whether they can kind of keep that momentum going.
Yeah, going back to Friday night's game, of course, the early kickoff was up in Finn Park, and Sligo Rovers were in town, Northwest Derby, and it was just a great game to watch as a neutral. I really, really enjoyed the game. Lewis Banks got the winner on the hour mark. Romeo Parks, hero and villain of the piece, scored in the first 6 minutes, sent off later in the game, and Babatunde Owolabi, he actually had equalised almost instantly in the first 10 minutes. So interesting game. I think Romeo Parks is probably the main, I suppose, talking point of it. I know you didn't see the incident first time round, but you had it fairly spelled out to you at the time, Alan. What were your thoughts on the I suppose, alleged headbutt, the movement of the head towards the player? There was very clear movement, probably a definite red card in my opinion, but what were your thoughts?
Yeah, for me, it's in front of the linesman. It's a silly. You can't do it nowadays. There's definite movement of the head, so look at the referee got the call right. But I thought it was a very entertaining game. In fairness and fair play to Harps, I thought I'm not going to even try and pronounce his name. You tried to do it there, but he gave them.
We tried to do it. I think I did it. Maybe.
Did you? Yeah. But he get what is it?
Well, I'm going to go with Babatunde Owolabi, and I hope that's
I go Owolabi. So no, but it's the first time this season I kind of seen John Mahon and Gary Buckley tested, as in he gave them a good game. He was running in behind. He was big. He was strong. But for me, again, Rovers held out with 10 men, and Ed McGinty pulling off another late save. We touched on Shamrock Rovers there getting late points, but if you go back and see all the late saves that Ed McGinty has made for Sligo Rovers, there's a hell of a lot of points he's won them.
Yeah, I do think so. I think, I know even against Longford, he pulled off one or two great saves later on, and he's probably been one of the better players this season. We're going to talk a little bit about maybe some of the categories and pick out some notable performances, as well as a couple of villains later on in the show. But let's work our way through the fixture list over the weekend. Moving a bit towards the capital, Drogheda United obviously in action against Derry City. 2-1 win there for Derry City, and Will Patching opened the scoring after 10 minutes. Mark Doyle on the hour mark. But it was Will Patching again, another goal, 15 minutes from time. And he has been one of my highlights of the season. Probably hasn't got the column mentions because of the fact that he's playing at Derry, and it hasn't been a great start to the season for Derry. But he's been one of the players who've been very, very impressive. Would you be surprised to see him back in Dundalk, recalled from loan, if that's an option for them?
Possibly. I think someone asked Jim Magilton that after the game the other night, and he didn't really respond to it. But he looks very impressive. We played against him twice now this season, and he's definitely been, very, very dangerous. He provides probably most of their chances, if not all. He's a set piece taker as well, chipping in with a few goals. So, like you said, probably flying under the radar a little bit just because Derry hadn't had a great start to the season, but definitely a quality footballer. And I think, once fans are allowed back in, that's definitely a player that people should be looking to go and see. And he's kind of in that, maybe not the same mould as Jack Byrne, but the same type of area of the pitch where, creativity, goal scoring, and where the game's won. Like, so if people are looking for an exciting player to go and watch, that's definitely one that should be on people's list. But Will Patching's definitely had a good season so far, and no surprise that his goals and assists have now coincided with Derry moving up the table and picking up results.
Yeah, and of course, it's been an interesting time. Another name on everyone's lips this weekend was David McMillan. He got his 100th goal for Dundalk. 100th league goal, not the 100th for Dundalk. He's been around the block a little bit with a couple of different clubs. But 100th league goal, two of the winners, St. Patrick's Athletic, who had been running really, really well. And Dundalk just seem to be Jekyll and Hyde at the moment. They go out to beat Rovers, they get hammered by Bows, they come back, they beat Pats. You never really know what to expect when they take to the field at the moment.
No, and the funny thing with Dundalk is, as you said, they got the drubbing on Monday night, 5-1, and then to beat Pats, the way they beat them. Look, it's just we all know, we've talked about it enough on the show how much a mess it is up there at the minute, but they still have a quality squad. They still have quality players all over. You look at Pat Hoogan coming back into the frame again. It's going to be. I think the break is probably coming at a good time for them. They let them regroup, and it'll be interesting to see what Dundalk come back at the end of this break.
Yeah, I suppose the league table with Sligo Rovers out in front, 31 points, 1 point ahead of Shamrock Rovers. A little bit of a gap back then to St. Pat's there on 25, 6 points behind Sligo at the top of the table. Drogheda United 22, Bohemians 20, Finn Harps 18, Dundalk and Derry both back on 17 points. There's a nice kind of gap there. 5 teams separated by 5 points from 4th right down to 8th. And then I suppose worryingly from a Longford point of view, a big gap appearing now, 10 points gap between yourselves and Derry, just ahead of you, Dean. 7 points from the opening 14 games. Waterford, the only team with a worse record, they have 6. I know we've spoken about this a lot on the show, and it's probably unfair that you're here every 2 weeks to kind of have to deal questions on it. But from Longford's point of view, can that gap be bridged, or are we looking at a 2-horse race essentially, see who can stay ahead of the other to avoid the automatic playoff position or the automatic relegation spot?
Yeah, I think from the outside, people will look at it as 2-horse race now. We haven't given up on trying to make more ground up. And it wouldn't be the first time in League of Ireland football where, a team kicks on a little bit in the second half of the season, the third round of games, the fourth round of games, and finds something, whether it's a player that comes in the window or whatever. So, we're not giving up on anything. I think we feel we've been close but not got some rewards. So maybe we're looking for a little bit of luck or something to turn. And as we all know, sometimes it's a little bit of something, like maybe a bit of luck or a ball going in from nowhere kind of thing that just sets you on a bit of momentum then. Like I said, we're not giving up on being able to kind of claw back some of that ground, but it's up to us to do it on the pitch. We can't just say we want to do it. We've got to go and do it and get some points on the board.
Yeah, let's take a look at the first division before we move on to kind of our highs and lows of the season so far. And the 5 games in the first division, I think 4 of them, they're really notable results. I think Cove's victory 1-0 against Cork City, their first win in a long, long time against Cork in competitive fare. Shells, they beat Galway 4-0. That's a big statement as well for Ian Morris's side. UCD come back from 2-0 down to win away at Athlone, and Treaty United confirm that they're here to stay, 2-0 winners at Bray. And of course, the final result at Wexford, their first win of the season, 2-0 against Cabinteely. To be fair, all 5 games, noteworthy. The first division really has been one of my highlights of the year. Any of those particular fixtures catch either of your attention? Alan, maybe we'll start with you. Any of those stand out as kind of games to kind of maybe go back and take a look at the highlights in?
Well, obviously you're gonna Shelburne beating Galway. That's a massive 4-0 Galway. We spoke to John Caulfield on the show and the ambitions that they have. I think for the season, Treaty and Athlone have been the performance for me, considering everyone has backed Shells to win the league, because they really, realistically speaking, Shells have a Premier Division team playing in the first division with the players that they have. But I think Athlone and Treaty for me is definitely surprise packages in the first division, and Galway would have been really, really disappointed getting a done of that sort against their rivals for the title in Shelburne.
I suppose the only positive from, and Dean, you would have experienced this last year, is that 5th place is good enough to get you into those playoffs. And then it's really a case of who stands up on the day. Longford only finished 4th in the league last year, and yet they were the ones who emerged through the playoff system to get that final spot in the Premier Division. From your point of view, when we saw the run Galway went on last year, they're only 2 points off that playoff position. Cork and about 3 or 4 points behind them again. It really is anybody's to make that push and get into that gap. And I suppose you lived it last year.
Yeah, I mean, it's really chaos in that first division because anything can happen. And it's really not a huge run of form that's needed to kind of get into the playoffs in the end. Like if you can just stay in touch and keep picking up wins, and as we're seeing, everybody's kind of beating everybody. Everybody's chipping in with results here and there. Even Wexford chipped in with their first result, like that way. So, pretty much everyone's in contention right up until the last round of games, and I think that's what they went for when they went for this format of playoffs. So it's worked the last couple of seasons, and it's provided very exciting playoff games, but also that last few games to run into the playoffs has always been very, very exciting and very, very competitive. And even the shakeout of the teams, you could end up sixth or second, or you could end up fifth, or anywhere in between. So I think it just opens the door for a lot of excitement. And it's usually the team that can find some consistency, like you said, we did in the playoffs, but we didn't finish the season with consistency. We lost our last two games going into it. So sometimes it's about getting in, and then, what can you do when you get in? So all those teams will still feel they have a chance, and they can put together a couple of results or whatever it might be, and get one of those slots, and then it's anybody's game from there.
Yeah, just from the record, just for the record, in terms of the league table, 10 games played so far out of a full round of 27 to be played this year. So about a third of the way through, we've one full round of fixtures plus one extra round played last weekend. Shells lead 24 points from their opening 10 games. The only unbeaten record left in the League of Ireland. UCD, they have 19 points, a little bit behind, while Athlone and Treaty on 16 points each. Cabotini 15, Bray of 14, Galway, as we mentioned, on 13, and then a little gap back to the Munster sides. Cork City on 9, Cove Ramblers on 8, with Wexford picking up their first win of the season, but also of Ian Ryan's tenure in the club in his second game. They'll be delighted with that. They prop up the table, though, 3 points at the bottom of the table. Now, lads, I set you a bit of a challenge coming into today's show because we wanted to maybe just take a little bit of a recap over what's happened over the last couple of months or so since the league came back earlier this year. And we've picked a couple of categories. We want to have a little chat about, I suppose, people who've impressed you, best goals, that sort of stuff. So maybe if we start with that and talk about maybe the best goals that you've seen over the course of the last couple of weeks. Anyone want to throw out a name or two or a game to talk about the best goal they've seen so far? Any honourable mentions before you give us your actual choice?
There's been a good few. I suppose you have Jordan Gibson against Waterford. You have Chris Forrester there not so long ago. You have a couple of very good team goals. You've seen Bowes with a great team goal there on Saturday. But there's one I think that stands out for me. I don't know if you want me to say it yet or do you want me to hold back?
Well, no, you give them 2 or 3. Maybe we might hear a couple from Dean. Any thoughts from you, Dean?
Yeah, just I think the league's had a kind of goal of the season competition against us this year, like with Chris Forrester and Liam Burke, and there's been a few. But I think I'll give Connor Davis a little mention. One of our own goals against Bowes earlier in the season, a little solo run, beat a couple of players and got us back in the game. We ended up getting a point, so just one there. But I think me and Alan are probably going to say the same thing for the top goal that we've seen so far.
Oh, now there's no pressure at all. One you mentioned Liam Burke, but I think there's been 2 there as well. He got one against Drogheda as well earlier on. It was a fabulous team goal. The ball from Dawson Devoy probably made it. I don't know if that's the one you're going to pick. Possibly not, because you've mentioned there's one glaring, obviously, one that you haven't either mentioned. So I don't know which one we want to go first. We'll start with go with you, Alan, and Dean might nod his head if he agrees with you. What do you think? Goal so far in the season?
I think it has to be Graham Burke, Derry City, halfway line, straight over. That's, I could try that on for the whole career. I wouldn't get it. It was just quality. It took a touch, see the keeper off the line, and I don't think it bounced forward even went in. So that was my pick anyway.
Does distance and opportunism always trump kind of the top corner element of in goals like that, in your opinion?
Yeah, I definitely think so, because the awareness of him, you don't have much time on the ball. Dean would know from position you play, you get it. He's obviously looked at that keeper off his line already previous, and then he's got that opportunity, and it's touch and bang. And to get like that is just, I think for me, it definitely does beat the wonder strikes anyway. But it was a wonder strike.
Dean, your thoughts on that? Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so. And like Alan said, you don't have a huge amount of time, and the best players kind of have a picture of what's going on around before they receive the ball. So I think you have to give some credit towards that. And I think we all, as professionals or whatever in the league, you'll strike a ball nicely a couple of times, whether it's out of your feet from the edge of the box, and sometimes they go in, sometimes you get those great strikes. But it's very rare that you kind of get the whole distance, vision, technique correct in one go. And again, especially against a full-time outfit and a full-time goalkeeper, you don't often get those opportunities. So you have to give huge credit when you see it going in like that. And like Alan said as well, it was a great strike of the ball too. It wasn't kind of a loopy one that dropped in. He really hit it and drilled it well. Like,
yeah, he knew exactly what he was doing. In terms of, I suppose, the next category, and that was the one I kind of expected you both to say. In terms of the next category, we go with best team, and I'm not necessarily looking for the team best or top of the table, but maybe that is the case. But what team has been, in your opinion, the best? Maybe based on the resources they've got, based on the performances or the expectation coming into the season. What teams have impressed you? I'm going to throw it out there to start the discussion, and I know Sligo should feature at some stage, but Drogheda United for me, the style of play, the performances based on, I suppose, where they came from and the expectations coming up from the first division. I start with you, Dean, maybe in terms of what you think.
Yeah, I agree with you. I was going to say pretty much the same. Like Sligo would get a good mention, really solid, good start to the season. But I would go with Drogheda as well. And again, off my own experiences, they've beaten us kind of well in 2 games, and they're playing good stuff. It's not just kind of, hanging in there and dragging out results. They're playing really well. Some of the goals are very good. Again, like you said, with a mix of maybe resources and expectations where you would expect them to be. I think they've exceeded all of those. So I'd be in agreement with you there. I'd say Drogheda United for me.
Al?
Yeah, it's an easy choice to say it's like a Rovers, they're top of the table, but you touched on it there. Drogheda have come up from the first division. It's not easy to establish yourself that quick within the league. It takes a while, but my God, Drogheda have hit the ground running, and Tim has been playing some very, very good football and exciting to watch there, and there's some quality players as well.
Yeah, well, let's. I think we're all agreed there. Any honourable mentions for me? I think it's very hard to not mention Treaty and Athlone in the first division, and UCD have been, given the nature of what they do there. I think the performances they've pulled out, some of the results they've had, and some of the goals they've scored has been pretty good as well. When you look down into the first division.
Yeah, I think definitely Treaty anyway deserve a big mention. Like they weren't even a club this time last season, or they didn't have a senior men's team.
6 months ago, never mind a year ago.
And we spoke to Tommy obviously, and he told us the recruitment process was 2 weeks to 10 days before, and then into the season. And they're very competitive in every game. I know they've got some League of Ireland experience with the lads that they have down there in the squad, but what they're doing is very, very good. And again, like we spoke about, they might have adjusted their expectations to wanting to be in the playoffs now, because they've had such a good start.
Yeah, I definitely Treaty. I agree with you, Treaty, and I think Athlone Town as well. We touched it on the show briefly about Treaty. We did predict it's going to be a tough, long year for them. So no one would have thought how well they actually done. And I suppose Athlone as well, to me, they're always around the basement. And for me, they've excelled as well this year.
Yeah, I agree with you. Best manager, who has impressed you? And we've had so many of them through the league this year. We don't know how many managers some clubs have even had in the last couple of weeks. But who has impressed you from the dugout over the last couple of weeks? Alan, your turn to maybe kick the ball off on this one.
Well, you some quality managers within the league. Ollie Horgan's doing a very, very good job in Finn Harris, but for me, I'm going to have to say Tim Clancy for the job. He has, again, we spoke of Drogheda, have exceeded all expectations. From I always thought that they'd be safe enough, but I didn't think they'd do as well as they're doing. So I think Tim, he has been playing some good football and not on the biggest of budgets.
Dean? You're not allowed to say Dara before you get in trouble.
Am I playing next week or not, Dara?
Yeah, I'm giving you a free pass. You can't say Dara, so Dara, don't drop him on the basis of not picking you.
I think I agree with Alan, obviously, on team, and I'd have to say Liam Buckley as well, because Sligo have been really good and impressive, and something that maybe hasn't been always associated with Liam's teams is they're rock solid, especially through that spine of the team. And you always associate Liam with great football. They pass it well, create a lot of chances, goal scoring team. But I think they've been a little bit more practical this year as well, and kind of, they're really, really stout through the spine of the team. We mentioned Gary and John Mann there as well, and Ed. So that trifecta at the back, that little triangle, has been really, really strong for Liam. But I think Liam has set them up to be a little bit more practical this year, so he definitely deserves a mention in terms of manager so far at this point, yeah.
It's funny, actually, Liam would have been my choice if he'd given me an option. I just think when you look back to where they were this time last year, 0 points from 4 games, rock bottom of the table, look and campaigning not to bring the league back at the time, if memory serves. And since then, it's just been a complete polar opposite. I think the recruitment through the off-season is nothing short of spectacular with some of the players that Sligo have brought in. And I think a lot of that credit is down to Liam and bringing in some really, really talented players. And there were gambles. We've seen gambles not work for other teams. But the likes of Lewis Banks, who came in 3 years ago and has become a stable in that team, and then the likes of Greg Bulger and Robbie McCourt and players who've come in and just literally taken to the showgrounds. I think Liam deserves all the credit. And of course, John Russell and the whole team down there as well, in terms of the setup in Sligo. On unlimited resources, they don't have the budgets that Dundalk or Shamrock Rovers have, but yet they're well able to live with them. And it'll be interesting to see if they can keep that pressure up through the season. I suspect possibly not, but I do think at this point they'll be firmly in the European spots come the end of the season. I can't see them holding on to win the league when the games start mounting up through the season. Anyway, move on. Best player so far in terms of who has impressed you. We've said a few names through the last couple of minutes. Who has been the best player in the league in your opinion so far? Dean, I think it's your turn.
Yeah. There's been a number really impressive. Like, we don't have a real sprint away leader in terms of goal scoring charts, that way sometimes it goes to maybe a Sean Maguire or someone like that over the last few years. But I'm going to go back to Sligo, and I think Gary Buckley. I played against Gary quite a bit as a central midfield player, and he's slipped back a little bit into centre half now, and he's been brilliant. And again, I'm coming from when we played against him a little bit as well, just as a better reference point, and he's been brilliant in the 2 games, and we haven't got much change out of him in either of those games, and he seems to be really good in the other games too, from what I've seen. So I'm going to go with Gary on that one.
Alan?
Yeah, well, look, there is as Dean said there, there's no real runaway goal scorer, which is a lack of strikers, I suppose. Like the caliber of Sean Maguire's and that within the league. But I think both fullbacks for Drogheda, is it Brown, right back, really impressed with him. Chris Forrester has come back into a bit of form. Lane Burt. There's a few, but I am going to have to go with Sligo Rovers as well, and Greg Bulger, centre midfield, and Ed McGinty was close. Yeah. And John Mann, I could name them, but in terms of the influence that he's had on the team, and with no fans being at the game, you hear the talking from him, you hear the getting the lads going and stuff. So for me, at this moment in time, Greg Bulger for me would have been probably the standout player.
Yeah, I think there have been some really, really good performances over the years. Danny Mandrew at Shamrock Rovers has been pretty good. He's had to move back more defensive in recent weeks to just fill gaps in the midfield at the point. But I think Greg Bulger has definitely been the most influential. Whether he's been the best remains to be seen, but he's definitely up there, but absolutely the most influential player on the pitch. For me, Gary Buckley, absolutely. But in honestly, I think John Mahon's a better centre-back. And so you pick him as the best player in the league. He might not even be the best centre-half of the club. And that just goes back to what we talked about Sligo in terms of what they've brought over the last couple of months to the recruitment and kind of getting that confidence flowing through that team. In terms of, are there any maybe of the smaller clubs or the clubs who haven't done well? Colm Whelan in UCD again has been great, but there's been that kind of forward 4 or 5 for UCD who really have looked to score at will. Colm Whelan is there, and we've also got, I know we're heading back towards the northwest again with some of these names, but Liam Kerrigan and Jack Keeney have been huge part of that as well. And I think Paul Doyle, again, another Sligo player coming through there at UCD. But when those 4 have been on the pitch, UCD have done well. when they miss any one of them, they've struggled. And I think it goes to show how strong those players are in that gap. Shells have been impressive as well. There's been a few lads involved with Shells who really have pushed it on. Anyone in particular stand out? Michael O'Connor, we've had him on the show. He's been banging in goals. But overall performances, would he be worthy of a consideration, Alan?
I'd say Ryan Brennan. I think he's on his form again, and Georgie Poynton. Both really. I think Ryan Brennan in particular. He's he started off the league and he's chipped in with a lot of important goals for them as well. So look, we've said it already in the show. The Shells have quality all over, and I still think that they'll probably win the league easy enough. Going by the quality that they have, and I think they really kick gear when the season returns. But yeah, Ryan Brennan for me probably would have been the one for the first division. Yeah.
In terms of best young player that we've seen so far in the league, there's plenty of people put their hands up, whether it's Johnny Kenny in the Showgrounds, Ryan O'Kane in Dundalk, Yaros in goals for Pats. There's been plenty of kind of players who've broken through. We know some names, some people who might be in the age range, the likes of Niall Moran and John Mahan, Ed McGinty, even Ed Irvin at Longford. Let's leave them out of consideration because they've been established in the league a little while. But who of the young crop coming through? There's a couple of lads at Pats as well have made an impression in the first couple of weeks of the season.
For me, I think Dawson Devoy, Bowes. I think he's quality, and I don't think he'll be in the league for too long if he continues. Andy Lyons is what is he? He's only 20, is he?
Yeah, he's under 21 international.
Yeah, so for me too in the league. Look, you spoke about Ed McGinty. Spoke about I like Brown at Drogheda. I think he's only 21, 22. So I thought for the first season in the Premier Division he's taken away storm as well. So but for me, yeah, I think Dawson Devoy when they really do well, I think him and Lyons are very good for both.
Dean, you've got a bit up closer and personal with them in recent weeks. Who have you found difficult to kind of get to terms with on the pitch?
Yeah, I'm going to stick with Bowes, but I'm going to go with Ross Tierney. I think he's been really good. Scored a couple of really important goals, and I know we set out to play a certain way, and he pretty much destroyed it in the first half. In Longford, we had to readjust, and we done pretty well in the second half. But really intelligent player. Clever runs, gets in the box, which will get him goals. And I think he's been really impressive. And like I said, we've mentioned kind of most of the others, or a lot of the other players that are maybe young but have a couple of years experience. But Ross has certainly stood out for me. And I know we've talked about Bowes and replacing maybe Danny Mandrew in that position. And Bastian Harry came in, maybe was going to play there. We thought possibly could have played there, but Ross is keeping him out of the team and has been really, really good. And like Alan just said about Dawson, you might not see Ross around too long if his growth keeps continuing the way it is.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting time to see if clubs can keep hold of these players in the coming weeks. We have two more categories to get through, and the first one I want to talk about before we talk about highlights is lowlights. What hasn't impressed you in the league this year? Could be on the pitch, could be off the pitch. For me, it's the loss of Watch LOI. I know we're going to have some form of streaming, but I thought that platform was a really solid base. I would be concerned if clubs go in their own directions and all have varying systems and varying standards, commentary, camera work, that sort of stuff. I think it's a step back if clubs go in different directions. That remains to be seen. No official announcements as yet, but we do expect something. What have you not been impressed with through the league so far?
I would say ourselves, or is that too obvious?
If you don't want to get hammered in the dressing room, you can say whatever you want. Yeah.
No, I think the one that stands out is obviously the situation that happened with Waterford and ending up fielding their 19s team who hadn't played a game in 6 or 7 months, and they took a hiding, and then the following week they had to forfeit a game. So I think that was the low light. I don't know who's to blame, or are we pointing fingers at specific people like in certain situations? Like sometimes that's difficult, but I just don't think it looked great for the league. And sometimes we're a little bit ridiculed in this country by sports fans and things like that about the League of Ireland, and that just seemed like a little bit of a lack of professionalism those couple of weeks for Waterford. So hopefully we don't have another reoccurrence of that where a team has to feel like a really inexperienced team or has to forfeit a game. And I think that kind of just showed the league up to be a little bit maybe unprofessional when there's so many people putting in so much work to make it really, really good. So that's probably the only one for me, like, that really, stood out in the first part of the season.
Alan, yourself, any lowlights?
Yeah, it's hard to look past the Waterford situation, isn't it? With the managerial going and coming and back at the start of the year, and then, as you said, I felt so bad for the 19s. I just thought that was just so unprofessional, and it's not nice. No one wants to be in that environment, like when you're getting tanked like that. And for me as well, the standard of refereeing, I don't think is up to where it used to be. I think there's a lot of frustration. I suppose you see it with fans on Twitter after games. Again, referee taking central stage, So I think they need to up their game too. I think that the quality is definitely lacking a little bit with the referees within the league.
Any other honourable mentions you want to mention before we move away from the disappointments of the last couple of months?
I think I'll stay away from saying anything about referees anyway.
For me, I suppose the situation at Dundalk is unfortunate. I think it's never nice to see the supporters lose faith with the people running the club, and that appears to have happened. And here's hoping that some resolution can be found to that. And I suppose there's an element of that in playing Waterford as well. So I'd like to see kind of those situations get resolved where everybody's on the same hymn sheet, all pulling in the right direction. I would like to see that happen. From a supporter's point of view, watching in, it's never nice to see a club crumble or even just go backwards like we are seeing with a couple of clubs in the league at the moment. And now my favourite one of the whole lot, highlights of the last couple of months. And it could be on the pitch, off the pitch, or whatever you think yourselves. Dean, anything that you've been particularly impressed by over the last few months?
I think the standard has been really good, and we've touched on all the players and the performances and things like that. But I think someone that is a highlight definitely is Danny Mandrew's inclusion in the Ireland squad. Like, just we have good players. We have very good players. We have people that are, capable of playing at a higher level, capable of playing maybe across the water in other leagues. And, I think that's, like I said about, maybe Waterford, people like ridicule the league a little bit when they see that, but it also gets great, credit when we start producing players that can go into the Ireland setup. So I think for me, that's one that just stands out, which is quite recent, but someone like Danny getting a chance to go in with the Ireland setup. And again, we've mentioned some good young players, so maybe we won't be long in seeing a few more that kind of come through that League of Ireland pathway. So I think they're always good stories, and that's one that stands out for me in terms of being a highlight, that we have a League of Ireland player again now breaking into the ranks of the international setup.
Alan, yourself?
Yeah, but definitely Danny Mandrew getting in is definitely a thing for the league. For me, I would say with the whole COVID situation that we've only had one Premier Division team that had to forfeit a game, and you're talking, I think, was it the only positive really test in Waterford, and then you had Cabinteely in the First Division. So overall, I think the clubs have done a massive job, and the players themselves that are within the league to get it up and running and keep it going, because like the situation that we're in, and we're in the middle of the pandemic, that it could easily have led to I suppose games cancelled and everything like that, but they've ran smoothly since the league has restarted, and that's great to see. And I think that's a massive positive, and hopefully come back after the break. All that other situation is sorted, and it runs smoothly again, and we get to see fans back in the game.
Yeah, I have a couple actually highlights over the last few weeks of stuff that's happened off the pitch. One is Finn Harps getting they got to 4 million for their development in Stranorlar. I think that's going to be a huge plus, and it really means it's going to happen, and that's important up there in Finn Harps, and the very best luck to them. The one initiative I loved, and again I'm going back to Sligo Rovers again, but it may have gone under the radar for a lot of teams and supporters across the league, but Sligo Rovers over the last few months have given a Sligo Rovers jersey to every single child born in Sligo General Hospital. And I think it's something, I know a lot of European clubs do that or have a similar kind of initiative, but it just creates that little bit of a bond where those early pictures get taken and shared on social media. And I think it's creating the right culture within the league. And I think hats off to the likes of Gerard O'Connor and to Theo and Confeely, who would have been involved in behind the scenes. And that I think there's some really bright stuff coming out of Sligo in recent years. And and other clubs, but that's one that caught my attention. And I think the other side of it is, you mentioned COVID, Alan. For me, the fact that for the last 12 months, we haven't been allowed to go to games, and yet we've seen more League of Ireland than we ever saw before. And I think that's a huge credit to be fair to the FAI and all the powers that be, to make Watch LOI a thing last year, to make LOI TV this year. And I will finish with one last one. That is the amalgamation, effectively, of the men's and women's leagues for sponsorship and promotion, both services, both leagues on the LOI TV platform. I think that is a huge step forward for the League of Ireland, whether it knows it or not yet. I think women's football is a huge part to play in the development of the game here in this country. We, of course, do a Women's National League show on the platform here. We treat the men's and women's teams the same, and I think it's going to be a great day for football when that's the way it's seen across the entire spectrum of the game. So for me, they're probably the highlights. I don't know if anyone wants to throw in anything else. I think I've touched most of it. Alan, you look like you have something to add to the pile.
Yeah, I think with Drogheda naming their stadium Head in the Game Park, I think that's a massive plus. And you obviously seen Bowes linking up with the colleges, and we spoke to representatives from Bowes and what they do for their players. Look after them both on and off the pitch. I'm sure most clubs do that, but definitely Head in the Game Park was a great initiative by Drogheda, and gets people talking. Why is it called that? Why is that? But look, you've touched on most of them there. I think it's all positives within the league.
Yeah, and I suppose we'll end it on that, really, for the first half, not quite half, but the first period of the League of Ireland for 2021 here on Final Whistle. No show next week. We're taking a bit of a break along with the rest of the league. I love that we had any amount of positives and only one or two tiny little gripes on the negatives. It's rare that that's a situation in the League of Ireland. Long may it continue, and may the positives and the promotion of the league and the games continue to be the main feature of all of the media coverage of the league. To Dean and Alan, thanks so much for all your help through the last 14 weeks. It's hard to believe it's been 14 weeks. It's kind of caught up with us over the last few weeks. It's what are you doing for the next 10 days, Dean? You got time off now that you're not in training this week?
Yeah, just got a couple of days away. But nothing major. Like, obviously still can't travel away, so but just a bit of a relaxation and recharge the batteries a little bit, and then back at it.
When's your first training session back? Next weekend?
Trip to Ibiza, no?
Not quite. I've never made that trip to Ibiza, funnily enough. But, no, just quiet one, couple of days away, and then we're back in Sunday morning, so we're back training then, like gearing up for the following week.
Alan, I know you're on call tonight. Thankfully, your buzzer didn't go off. Yourself, do you get an opportunity to get a bit of a breather at all over the next week or two?
I'm on call now till Monday morning, 8 o'clock. So I don't have the footballers' lives, where they just chill out and relax and head away for a couple of. I know I'm off the following week, but I'll head away from somewhere. I just want the games to be back. I don't know what I'm going to do now when I'm on call to look at.
I noticed you didn't confirm or deny whether you've been on that trip to Ibiza over the years. Alan, listen, and Dean, it's been a pleasure as always. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time for a look at the next round of fixtures, which we didn't even talk about this evening. It doesn't really matter. You know where they are. You'll find them on finalwhistle.ie or wherever you get your League of Ireland news. We'll be back in 2 weeks. I think it's your turn, Dean. I don't think to say it counts as being on the show because everyone's here. We'll be back with Dean in 2 weeks' time. Alan, 3 weeks' time. Talk to you after the break, boys. Enjoy it.